The harsh winter of 1855 was about to give the people of Devon something far more chilling than frozen rivers and accumulated snow. Picture yourself stepping outside on a crisp February morning, expecting to see nothing more than pristine white drifts, only to discover mysterious hoofprints trailing directly to your front door. But these weren't ordinary animal tracks. They climbed straight up your walls, crossed your rooftop, and continued on the other side as if the laws of physics held no meaning. Welcome to one of Britain's most enduring unexplained mysteries, the Devil's Footprints of Devon, a phenomenon that terrorized an entire county and continues to baffle investigators 170 years later. Why this mystery still captivates us. Today, the Devil's Footprints case represents far more than just strange marks in the snow. It's a fascinating intersection of Victorian society, scientific inquiry, folklore, and mass hysteria that reveals how unexplained phenomena can capture the collective imagination of an entire civilization. This incident became one of the first widely documented paranormal events in the modern era, occurring during the height of Victorian spiritualism when supernatural beliefs flourished alongside rapid scientific advancement. The case demonstrates the eternal human struggle between rational explanation and supernatural fear, making it as relevant now as it was in the 1850s. The mystery predated famous Victorian phenomena like Spring-Heeled Jack and established a template for how unexplained events would be investigated, documented, and debated in the modern era. What makes this case particularly compelling is how it challenged both scientific authority and religious doctrine, forcing Victorian society to confront the limitations of their understanding while revealing deep-seated cultural anxieties about the unknown. Setting the stage, Britain's brutal winter of 1855. The coldest winter in memory. The winter of 1854 to 1855 was exceptionally harsh across Britain, representing conditions worse than anything experienced in living, and for that matter recorded, memory. Temperatures remained around freezing from January through March, creating unprecedented conditions in the typically temperate coastal region of Devon. The persistent cold meant that rivers throughout the county, including the Exe and Tyne, were completely frozen, an extremely rare occurrence that provided entertainment for locals who organized spur-of-the-moment children's games and remarkably well-attended makeshift feasts on the ice. This extreme weather created perfect conditions for preserving any marks or impressions in the snow. Each new snowfall accumulated on top of the previous layer, as temperatures never rose high enough for melting. The accumulated snow provided a pristine canvas that would make any disturbance clearly visible, setting the stage for the extraordinary events that would unfold. Devon's isolated villages and supernatural heritage. In 1855, the villages of South Devon existed in relative isolation, with communication between communities slow, and many residents living their entire lives within a few miles of their birthplace. This isolation meant that when something extraordinary happened, word spread through whispers and rumors, often becoming embellished in the telling. The region was already steeped in Celtic folklore, with generations of stories about pixies, spirits, and supernatural creatures deeply embedded in the local culture. Devon's supernatural heritage was particularly rich, with pixies being especially concentrated in the high moorland areas around Devon, suggesting Celtic origins for these beliefs. Before the mid-19th century, pixies and fairies were taken seriously in much of Cornwall and Devon, with local folklore describing how pixies would mislead travelers in a phenomenon known as being pixie-led. This existing framework of supernatural belief would prove crucial in shaping how locals interpreted the mysterious footprints. The Night Hell Walked Through Devon. February 8, 1855, the fateful night. The mystery began on the night of February 8, 1855, during a heavy snowfall that blanketed South Devon. Contemporary accounts indicate that the last snow is thought to have fallen around midnight, providing a crucial time frame for the phenomenon. By 6 a.m. the following morning, something had left an extensive trail of mysterious footprints across the landscape, creating what would become known as the Great Devon Mystery. The narrow 6-hour window between the end of snowfall and the first discoveries makes the logistics of the phenomenon even more puzzling. Whatever created these marks had to traverse vast distances across challenging terrain in complete darkness during continuing snowfall conditions. The first discoveries. The first witnesses to discover the mysterious tracks were ordinary residents going about their morning routines. In the village of Topsham, locals noticed the peculiar hoof-like prints leading directly to their doors, but displaying impossible characteristics that defied natural explanation. The prints appeared to climb walls of buildings, appear on rooftops, then continue down the other side without any disturbance to the snow on top of the walls. Word spread rapidly through the isolated communities as more residents discovered similar tracks around their properties. The uniformity of the reports across multiple villages, each describing the same impossible characteristics, lent credibility to what might otherwise have been dismissed as isolated incidents or misidentifications. The impossible footprints, a detailed analysis, physical characteristics of the prints. The footprints themselves defied easy categorization, displaying characteristics that challenged both natural explanation and logical analysis. Contemporary accounts describe them as measuring about 4 inches, 10 centimeters long, 3 inches, 7.6 centimeters across, between 8 and 16 inches, 20 and 41 centimeters apart, and mostly in a single file. This single file arrangement was particularly puzzling, as it suggested a bipedal creature rather than any known quadruped. However, modern research has revealed that the prints were not as uniform as popular accounts suggest. According to Mike Dash's comprehensive investigation, the prints were not uniform in size, with some contemporary descriptions varying significantly from the standard measurements. Some witnesses reported prints as small as 1.5 inches across, while others described them as reaching 2.5 inches, suggesting either multiple phenomena or significant variation in the same mysterious source. The shape of the prints was consistently described as resembling cloven hooves, similar to a donkey's shoe, though with some variations. Some witnesses reported that the impressions appeared as if cloven, but in the generality of the steps the shoe was continuous, suggesting the prints sometimes appeared solid and sometimes split. The impossible journey. What truly set these footprints apart was their complete disregard for physical obstacles, displaying characteristics that seemed to violate basic laws of physics. The tracks were reported to demonstrate several impossible behaviors that no known animal could replicate. The prints climbed straight up walls and buildings, appearing on rooftops before continuing down the other side without any disturbance to the snow above. They crossed the Estuary, a 2-mile-wide span of water, appearing to walk on the frozen surface. The tracks passed through narrow drain pipes as small as 4 inches, 10 centimeters in diameter, appearing at the entrance and exit without any physical means of passage. They navigated over haystacks without disturbing the hay, crossed through walls and solid barriers, appearing on the opposite side without any visible breach. The prints traversed over 14-foot walls, appearing on one side and continuing on the other, as if they were no barrier. Geographic scope and pattern. The footprints appeared across an extensive area of Devon, with reports coming from more than 30 locations across Devon and a couple in Dorset. The main concentrations were around the Estuary, extending from Exmouth up to Topsham and across the Estuary to Dawlish and Tynemouth. Some reports claimed sightings as far south as Totnes and Torquay, and even as distant as Weymouth in Dorset and Lincolnshire, though these more remote claims are less well documented. Modern analysis suggests that rather than following a straight line across the county of Devon, as popular accounts claim, the tracks actually followed more complex patterns, often appearing in disconnected segments across the region. This fragmented distribution adds another layer of mystery to an already puzzling phenomenon: mass hysteria and religious terror. The clergy's response. Local religious leaders were among the most vocal in interpreting the footprints as supernatural in origin, though their responses were more varied than popular accounts suggest. The association with Satan was almost immediate, as cloven hooves had long been tied to the devil in folklore, art, and literature throughout Christian tradition. Some clergy used the incident to encourage church attendance, with reports that church attendance reportedly spiked in the weeks after the footprints appeared. However, not all religious figures embraced supernatural explanations. The case revealed broader tensions within Victorian Christianity between those who saw divine or diabolic intervention in unexplained events and those who urged rational investigation and caution. Community panic and fear. The discovery of the footprints created widespread terror throughout South Devon, with many residents refusing to leave their homes after dark. Contemporary newspaper accounts described how the phenomenon had created an uproar of commotion, and that many superstitious people in the above towns are actually afraid to go outside their doors after night. The Western Times reported that Exmouth had been thrown into a state of alarm in consequence of a report that the town and neighborhood had been visited in the night by no less a person than His Satanic Majesty. Armed groups of local men organized search parties, equipped with guns and clubs, to hunt for whatever had made the tracks, though these expeditions proved fruitless. The fear was particularly intense because in some villages it seemed that the maker of the tracks had visited nearly every home, creating a sense that no one was safe from whatever mysterious presence had walked through their community. The press coverage. The story remained localized for several days before reaching the national press, with the first comprehensive account not appearing until February 16, 1855, in the Times of London. This delay in reporting allowed the story to develop embellishments and additional reports from across the region before systematic investigation could begin. By the time journalists arrived to document the phenomenon, much of the physical evidence had been disturbed by curious onlookers or had melted away, hampering scientific analysis. The delayed and sensationalized coverage contributed to the legendary status of the event, allowing supernatural interpretations to take root before rational explanations could be properly investigated and presented to the public. Scientific investigations and expert opinions. Early scientific attempts. Despite the limitations of Victorian-era scientific investigation, several notable experts attempted to provide rational explanations for the phenomenon. The involvement of credentialed scientists demonstrated the importance of expert analysis, while also revealed the limitations of scientific method when dealing with potentially supernatural events. Dr. Edward Forbes, described as a renowned naturalist, traveled from London specifically to study the footprints, providing one of the first systematic scientific analyses of the phenomenon. Despite his expertise in natural history, Forbes was ultimately unable to provide a satisfactory explanation for the tracks, admitting they were unlike anything he had ever encountered in nature. Sir Richard Owen's animal theory. Sir Richard Owen, one of the era's most distinguished biologists, proposed that the tracks were made by badgers roaming the countryside in search of food. Owen's theory emphasized that badgers are nocturnal animals capable of traveling significant distances, especially in winter when food is scarce. As the only British plantigrade quadrupeds, badgers seemed like plausible candidates for creating hoof-like impressions. However, this theory faced immediate criticism from those familiar with animal tracking. Badgers create double-line tracks, not single-file, and cannot climb vertical walls or traverse the impossible obstacles reported by witnesses. The theory also failed to account for the vast distances covered and the consistent spacing of the prints across such varied terrain. Contemporary expert disagreement. Various other naturalists and experts of the time proposed different animal explanations, revealing the lack of consensus even among scientific authorities. The Reverend G.M. Musgrave suggested escaped kangaroos from a private menagerie, creating an elaborate story about Mr. Fish's private menagerie in Sidmouth. However, Musgrave later admitted to fabricating this explanation to calm his superstitious congregation, revealing how some attempted to create rational explanations regardless of their factual basis. Other theories included cats, rats, toads, or even large birds as potential culprits, but none could adequately explain the phenomenon's scale, consistency, or impossible characteristics. Modern scientific theories. The weather balloon hypothesis. One of the most compelling modern theories suggests that a weather balloon or experimental balloon dragging equipment could have created the prints. Author Geoffrey Household proposed that an experimental balloon from Devonport dockyard had broken free and trailed 2 shackles through the snow. According to this theory, the balloon's erratic path could explain several puzzling aspects of the phenomenon. The ability to cross rooftops and walls, the consistent spacing and directional pattern, the vast distance covered in a short time, and the appearance of flying over obstacles. Major Carter, whose grandfather allegedly worked at the Devonport base, provided supporting details about the balloon damaging conservatories and shattered greenhouses and windows before finally descending near Honiton. However, critics argue that no balloon was reported missing at the time, and trailing equipment would likely have become tangled in trees or other obstacles during such an extensive journey. The theory also struggles to explain the consistent hoof-like shape of the impressions across diverse terrains and conditions. The woodmouse theory. In the 1950s, zoologist Alfred Leuchter observed similar markings in Epping Forest and concluded they were made by woodmice hopping through snow. When woodmice move in kangaroo-like leaps of 2, 3 feet, their combined fore and hind limb placements can create impressions that mimic a cloven hoof, especially after thawing and refreezing cycles. This theory was actually first proposed in 1855 by Thomas Fox, a brewer and brickmaker, and was even published in the Illustrated London News with supporting illustrations. However, critics question whether small rodents could maintain hopping motion for the vast distances reported, and whether mice could create impressions large enough to match the 4-inch prints described by witnesses. Multiple animal and weather combination. Some researchers propose that the prints were created by various animals whose tracks became distorted by the unusual weather conditions prevalent that winter. The theory suggests that a combination of melting, refreezing, and wind could have transformed ordinary animal prints into the mysterious shapes reported by witnesses. This explanation attempts to account for the variation in print descriptions noted by modern researchers, suggesting that different animals in different locations could have contributed to the overall phenomenon. However, this theory struggles to explain the organized, directional pattern and the consistent reports of impossible traversals. The 2009 recurrence and modern parallels. Devon's return to the headlines. In March 2009, the mystery returned to Devon when Jill Wade, a retired local government officer, discovered similar hoofprint tracks in her garden in Woolsey, North Devon. The marks were similar to those in the original Devil's footprints, measuring around 5 inches long with a stride of between 11 and 17 inches and stretching 60 to 70 feet across her garden in an arch shape. The Center for Fortean Zoology dispatched zoologist Graham Inglis to investigate the prints, which were described as bearing striking similarities to those which appeared across South Devon in February 1855. Despite professional analysis, Inglis could only conclude that the prints likely belonged to a rabbit or hare, though he admitted the case was peculiar. Limited scope compared to 1855. While the 2009 incident reignited interest in the Devil's Footprints mystery, it was far more limited in scope than the original phenomenon. The tracks appeared only in a single garden rather than across multiple villages and counties, and no reports of impossible traversals or supernatural characteristics accompanied the discovery. This significant difference in scale raises questions about whether the 2009 incident represents a genuine recurrence of the original phenomenon or simply a coincidental occurrence that gained attention due to its superficial similarity to the historical mystery. Modern investigation techniques. Contemporary paranormal investigators now have access to sophisticated equipment including thermal cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, and digital photography for analyzing unexplained phenomena. However, the historical nature of the Devil's footprints means these modern tools cannot be applied to the original case, leaving researchers dependent on 170-year-old eyewitness accounts and newspaper reports filtered through Victorian-era journalism and cultural biases. Debunking the debunkers' problems with animal explanations. While various animal theories have been proposed over the decades, each faces significant challenges when subjected to detailed scrutiny. Badgers create double-line tracks rather than single file, cannot climb vertical walls, and lack the physical capability to traverse the impossible obstacles reported by witnesses. Kangaroos. No documented escapes from local menageries exist, and the hopping pattern doesn't match the consistent spacing observed. The Reverend Musgrove later admitted fabricating the kangaroo story. Cats and small mammals. Paw prints don't naturally resemble hooves, even when distorted by weather conditions. The scale of movement required would be impossible for such small animals. Wood mice. While capable of creating hoof-like impressions, they are too small to create 4-inch prints and unlikely to maintain hopping motion for the vast distances reported. Weather theory limitations. Meteorological explanations struggle to account for several key aspects of the phenomenon. The organized, directional pattern of the prints suggests purposeful movement rather than random weather effects. The consistent hoof-like shape across diverse terrains and conditions challenges purely weather-based theories, as does the appearance of prints in locations protected from wind and other atmospheric influences. The scale problem. Perhaps the most significant challenge to conventional explanations is the sheer scope of the phenomenon. The coordination required for a hoax covering 100 miles across multiple communities would have been extraordinary in 1855, requiring unprecedented organization and secrecy. Similarly, the biological implausibility of any single animal species creating such extensive tracks while demonstrating impossible physical capabilities leaves investigators grappling with seemingly insurmountable logistics. The folklore connection and cultural impact. Spring-heeled Jack and Victorian mysteries. The Devil's Footprints phenomenon occurred during the same era as Spring-heeled Jack sightings, another mysterious figure that terrorized Victorian Britain with supernatural mobility. Both phenomena shared characteristics of impossible movement, supernatural abilities, and the power to traverse great distances while leaving mysterious traces. Spring-heeled Jack, described as having superhuman agility and a taste for breathing blue and white balls of fire into the faces of his victims, was capable of performing impossible athletic feats, including leaping from the street onto the roofs of nearby houses. The legend was directly linked with the phenomenon of the Devil's Footprints, which appeared in Devon in February 1855, suggesting contemporary observers saw connections between these mysterious manifestations, Devon's supernatural landscape. The incident occurred in a region already rich with supernatural folklore, where stories of pixies, spirits, and otherworldly beings were part of daily cultural life. Devon's pixies were traditionally known for their ability to mislead travelers, making them stray in a phenomenon known as being pixie-led. These creatures were believed capable of supernatural movement and the ability to appear and disappear at will, providing a cultural framework for interpreting the mysterious footprints. The prevalence of Celtic folklore in the region meant that local residents had existing mental models for understanding supernatural phenomena, making the leap to diabolic explanation more culturally accessible than it might have been in regions with different folkloric traditions. Why this mystery endures the perfect historical enigma. The Devil's Footprints represents the ideal historical mystery, well documented enough to seem credible yet strange enough to defy easy explanation. The case embodies humanity's eternal fascination with the unknown while showcasing the ongoing tension between rational skepticism and wonder at the inexplicable. The mystery also reflects broader themes about how societies construct meaning from ambiguous evidence, the role of folklore in shaping interpretation, and the limitations of both scientific method and supernatural belief in explaining genuinely puzzling phenomena. Modern relevance. In our contemporary age of GPS tracking, surveillance cameras, and instant global communication, it seems impossible that such a mystery could occur without immediate explanation. Yet the Devil's Footprints reminds us that some questions may never be fully answered, and perhaps that's exactly what makes them so enduringly fascinating. The case continues to attract researchers and enthusiasts from around the world, demonstrating how historical mysteries can transcend their original time and place to become part of our collective fascination with the unexplained. Whether the explanation lies in natural phenomena we don't yet understand, elaborate human deception, or something genuinely beyond current knowledge, the mystery continues to intrigue anyone who encounters this extraordinary tale from England's past. The enduring appeal of the Devil's Footprints lies not just in its mysterious nature, but in what it reveals about human nature itself, our need to find meaning in the inexplicable, our tension between reason and wonder, and our eternal fascination with the possibility that there are still mysteries in the world that resist our understanding. In an age where everything seems explainable and documentable, the Devil's Footprints stands as a reminder that some mysteries may be meant to remain unsolved, continuing to capture imaginations and inspire wonder for generations to come. If you love unraveling mysteries, true crime, unexplained phenomena, historical enigmas, and suspenseful stories, you're in the right place. Like this video, drop your thoughts or theories in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most intriguing tales. Stay curious and keep seeking the unknown.